Hello, everybody. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Erik Erikson's developmental or psychosocial theory, and I'm going to be going through each one of the stages, and more specifically, looking at it from the perspective of how in each stage Erikson proposes a sort of fight between these two opposing characteristics of life. Like, for example, in the first one, it's trust versus distrust. And you could say, well, you need to be trusting, you don't want distrust, right? But what he says is that both of them are bad because both of them are extremes, right? So what you want to do is actually not be too trusting and not be too distrusting, but be able to use both of them. So kind of like be somewhere in the middle, right? And that's the idea that I'm going to be getting into, because ultimately the resolution between these two opposing forces creates a virtue, right? Um, a type of tool, you could say, that you need um, in order to continue to the next stage, right? And what's very interesting about Erik Erikson's developmental theory is that not only does it have to do with learning, but it also has to do with the whole human life, right? Like a lot of theorists like Piaget or Freud, I think, only talk about development up until like puberty or up until like 18 years old. But Erikson actually talks about them throughout human life until like basically you die, until like your 70s, 80s, 90s. Okay, so I asked ChatGPT what was up with this. I was like, what's up with this? And ChatGPT gave me some basically some ideas on how to talk about this. So that's what I'm going to be like reading here and also giving my input on this. So we're gonna start off with the first one. Okay, and just right before I get into this, I wanted to talk about learning, because ultimately this developmental theory talks about how you learn, how you develop through life, how you mature, right? Very interesting theory. And learning, I was just thinking about this, learning, I may make more videos on this topic in the upcoming weeks, because I'm actually going to be working on it with some students in the next couple of weeks, this theory from Erik Erikson. So if I have more input on it, I'll make more videos, or as we finish with the topic in school, I'll possibly make a video at the end, possibly. I don't promise it, but possibly. And I was like, well, anyway, we're going to be looking at this theory a couple of weeks, and we're going to be doing different things with it. I plan on doing like an interview as well, and also like having students give me examples from this. So I think it's going to be pretty good for them to be able to learn it. And if you see what I'm doing, it's basically like repeating, right? But repeating it with different, like I think a teacher, in order to teach effectively, needs to repeat the same thing, but under different circumstances, or it basically needs to be presented, the same information needs to be presented in different ways, right? Under different activities, right? Under different situations. But again, that's that repetition, right? And I remember in university, like teachers and my classmates and even I would always talk about meaningful learning, right? Like let's distance ourselves from that rote repetition way of teaching and learning, right? Where it's just like repeat, 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 and memorize, right? And let's have students actually learn things that are meaningful to them, right? Or at least learn things that they need to learn in school, right? In a meaningful way. And I say need to learn in the sense that obviously there are a lot of things that you learn that you don't need to learn, but you do need to learn the way in which you think about those things, right? Because that's problem solving ultimately in your mind, right? So what this idea, this initial idea, what I'm trying to say with this initial idea is basically that meaningful learning is a way to try to get out of repetition, is a way of trying to get out of basically working to learn, right? Because there are like two problems with meaningful learning. First of all, you can't make everything meaningful, because then nothing is meaningful, right? If everything is meaningful and it's like, oh yeah, like you see this once and it's so meaningful, you learn it and you don't have to see it ever again. If you do that with everything, right, then you're not going to learn anything, because it's going to be the same thing. You're going to have a lot of information and nothing's going to be meaningful anymore if everything is meaningful. And the second problem with meaningful learning, and this, I just had like this epiphany earlier today, is that if you're always trying to achieve meaningful learning with students, right? Like a tactic is like detecting your students' needs. And if you detect your students' needs, like, okay, you like I don't know, Disney. So let's make activities with Disney. So I'm gonna teach you Erik Erikson's theory with Disney, right? And it's meaningful for that person. What you're trying to do ultimately is get away from the repetition. You're trying to distance yourself from repeating. So you expect that by teaching something once, they're going to be able to get it, and that will allow you to go into other things, right? But at the end of the day, that's not what teachers do, even if they're trying to make teaching meaningful, because you still need to see the things repeatedly over and over again, at least twice or three times, right? You're not going to just see one thing once, it's meaningful, let's move on to the next topic. No, you need to repeat it, right? You need to see it again and again, like I mentioned, under different circumstances. That's why teaching and the learning process, the teaching and the learning process is still very much traditional, even though we're in the technological era, in the digital era, in the information era, or whatever, in the postmodern era. You go to school and it's still the same thing. Teacher in front of students, talking, explaining, having them do activities, right? And memorizing the topics. You're still memorizing, right? Unless there's no curriculum, then you can just learn whatever you want and basically have it be like a Montessori, right? Okay, so let's get into it. So Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory of human development outlines 8 stages. This is what ChatGPT says, each characterized by a specific conflict between two opposing outcomes. Balancing these conflicts is crucial for healthy development, as each extreme can have negative consequences. Okay, so here we go. The first one is trust versus mistrust. This occurs when you're born all the way until you're 1 year old. One extreme is the extreme trust extreme, which is over trusting. It says this can lead to gullibility and vulnerability, and the individual might lack discernment and fall prey to exploitation. Now, what I like about Erik Erikson's theory is that even though you learn it at a very young age, or it's being developed at a very young age, you basically carry it throughout your whole life, right? You can say that this is the age or the stage in which you learn this, and whichever way you lean to is the imbalance you're gonna have, and what you really want to achieve is that balance, right? The other extreme is the extreme mistrust, and this is overly or being overly distrustful, can result in paranoia, fear, and inability to form healthy relationships. Obviously, you're gonna be like antisocial. You're not gonna believe in anybody or believe what anybody says, right? The individual may struggle with intimacy and dependence on others, right? So obviously they're not, like over here you have an extreme, which is like basically being very dependent, trusting people too much, and basically possibly a lot of times getting taken advantage of. And on the other extreme, you're gonna have a person that is going to completely mistrust everybody, right? And is obviously not going to have any type of relationship, because they're always going to be thinking like, oh, you're cheating on me, oh, you're lying to me, oh, you're probably planning to hurt me, whatever, right? So the balanced resolution is achieving a balance fosters a sense of trust in others while retaining a healthy level of skepticism. Okay, the individual can form secure relationships and has confidence in their environment while being cautious when necessary. I completely agree. This is like showing people your teeth, right? It's like I can bite, right? I think Jordan Peterson once said that. Or basically, just waving your sword there, right? Like, I have this nature, this side of me that's distrustful, right? But but I'll trust you for now, right? You're able to know when to trust and when not to trust, and that is the balance. That is key. Okay, the second one, autonomy versus shame and doubt. These are two counter ideas. This goes from early childhood, so more or less, or this happens in early childhood when you're 1 to 3 years old. Okay, so one extreme is the extreme autonomy. So here you're over dependent. You're overly, no, sorry, if you're very autonomous, you're overly independent, right? So this can lead to impulsiveness and a lack of cooperation. So yeah, it's like, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it, right? A lot of initiative, which again, we can say, well, that's better than being doubtful and shameful and feeling shame all the time. And I would say, yeah, but no, like what you really want is balance, right? And the individual might struggle with authority and rules. So yeah, just imagine a person that is very like, I know best, I'll do it myself, right? And the other extreme is extreme shame and doubt. Overly doubtful can cause feelings of inadequacy and low self-esteem. This sounds like people nowadays, basically. The individual may become overly dependent on others for validation, right? And you can kind of see where it starts. It starts as early as 1, 2, 3 years old. So this doesn't happen when you're a teenager. I mean, you're already carrying this from this age, right? And if you go deep into the theory, Erikson's going to explain the virtue that you get from this, who the people are that you're surrounded with, right? Like the first one I think is the mother, and the second one is like the mother and the father, right? Eventually it goes to like the siblings and the extended family, and then like your classmates, and then it just builds your social world up, right? Okay, so the balance resolution would be achieving a balance allows for self-confidence and a sense of control over one's actions. So it's like you have to not control others, but control yourself, right? The autonomy you do or you execute is not over others, but over yourself, right? Regulation. And I guess you use that shame and that doubt to kind of regulate yourself, right? If you're so autonomous, by autonomy, I think Erikson means like very proactive, right? Like you're a person that's like, yeah, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it, right? And then, how do you stop a person like that? Well, like with shame and doubt, right? It's like, you're embarrassing yourself, or are you really sure about that, right? Shame and doubt. And the individual can make decisions independently while understanding their limits and seeking help when needed, right? So yeah, if you're very proactive, if you have a lot of autonomy, you're also gonna lack the skill of seeking help when you need it, right? You're not gonna know when you need it, and you're not gonna ask for it when you need it. So that's bad. So yeah, I think you do need that balance here too. Okay, the third one is initiative versus guilt. This is the preschool era. This is from age 3 to 6. The extreme initiative, you're overly assertive, so it can result in recklessness and an inability to consider other people's feelings, right? So complete lack of awareness, complete lack of empathy, complete lack of perspective on the other person, right? The individual may struggle with social interactions and respect for others' boundaries, right? So this could be a person that's like very, like a kid, I imagine, playing, and maybe his classmates or his friends are kind of like struggling to do something, to kick the ball around if they're playing soccer, and he'll just kind of like run up to the ball and kick it, like, I'll do it, right? Like, God, like we need to get this done already, right? And the other extreme is extreme guilt, overly guilty. So there's like a big problem with guilt in our modern society, right? We all think we're philosophers and everything is moral, right? And if you do something wrong, it's probably wrong because it generates guilt, or it should generate guilt in you. And if it doesn't, you're like a sociopath, or you're like a bad person, basically. So the extreme guilt can cause inhibition, fear of taking initiative, obviously, and passivity, being passive, not doing anything, not getting anything done, maybe even possibly like procrastinating, right? The individual might avoid trying new things due to fear of failure. Yeah. And the balance here is achieving a balance fosters the ability to initiate activities and interact socially while maintaining a sense of empathy, there it is, and responsibility, right? So that's huge, excuse me. If you're able to balance empathy and responsibility, like I'm responsible and I also have empathy for people, and balance those two things out and know when to, act responsibly and maybe even tell people like, hey, we need to move on, but also show, obviously, which way my personality leans. I'm more into the like initiative, what was the other one? The one that I just mentioned, into autonomous, right? Proactive. But I also know that this other side is important. It's important to consider other people's emotions. It's important to show empathy, right? And it says the individual can take action and explore their environment with confidence, understanding the consequences of their actions. Yeah, I think that's huge. So it's like, we're going to get this done. But also, if you don't consider other people's emotions, which sometimes is a drag, can actually be counterproductive, right? Because now you lose your team, and the next activity you have long term, you're not going to get it done because nobody's going to want to work with you, right? Okay, the fourth one is industry versus inferiority. This is school age, ages 6 to 12 years old. You have one extreme, the extreme of industry, you're overly competent. So this can lead to workaholism and neglect of social relationships, right? So imagine that adult in their 20s and their 30s, men or women, where they're just workaholics. They're working all the time. It's all about work, right? The individual might measure their self-worth solely by their achievements, right? So you're industrious. Industrious basically means you're working, you're getting things done, right? And the other side is extreme inferiority, or you're overly inferior, right? It's kind of like paradox, overly. But it can result in feelings of incompetence and low self-worth, right? The individual may avoid challenges and lack motivation to succeed. See, and I think if you're a person that has this extreme of of overly industrious, you obviously need to feel that it's like doubt or shame, right? It's going to stop you from going so fast, right? And also, if you're on the other side, if you're like more slow, if you have like a low self-esteem, if you feel inferior, it's going to help you to feel like industrious, to be a little bit more motivated. But I think it's easier for the industrious to kind of like dosify or inject him or herself with some like tiny doses of this inferiority to kind of slow down than it is for the person that feels inferior to kind of like speed it up, right? Because it's like the person that's going fast, you just have to make them doubt, think for a little bit, and then they may be like, okay, you're right, I need to slow down. Will they do it? That's another thing. But the person that's kind of like slower or more passive, I guess it's harder for them to kind of like bring them up to speed, right? So the balance resolution here is achieving a balance encourages a sense of competence and pride in accomplishments while recognizing the value of social connections and leisure. Leisure here is huge, right? You need time to relax. You need time to just not do anything, right? And the individual can work diligently while maintaining a healthy self-image and balanced lifestyle, right? All right. So we are in stage number 5, which is what Erik Erikson, I think is one of Erik Erikson's, besides the stages, identity is the topic that he's most known for, or I guess like his biggest contribution to psychology. And I just made a video recently called Identity Redevelopment, where I talk about, identity and how to basically update your identity as an adult. But here we're talking about being a teenager. So it's basically from ages 12, 13 until 18, 19, right? And it's identity versus role confusion. And this is going to be interesting to get into. So, on one side, you have extreme identity, which is you're overly certain of an identity. This can result in rigidity and intolerance of differing viewpoints, right? So it's like if it makes you intolerant. If you're exposed to other points of view and you have this point of view, right? Like my point of view is F, and from the alphabet, F. And if I see point of view A or point of view B or point of view D or point of view LMA, LMN, PQ, whatever, I don't accept it because it's not my viewpoint. It's not my identity, right? It's not what I ultimately identify with. And you see this with teenagers, right? Their identity sometimes gets taken to an extreme. It's like I'm this now, and it's like that's just a stage, right? But it is very important because I think what helps you to define yourself when you're a teenager is in part how you're going to be the rest of your life, right? So the individual might struggle with adapting to new experiences and therefore being unable to grow, to mature, right? Because you think you got it figured out. You become dogmatic, right? You say, this is who I am, this is, me, and that's all there is to me, right? And it's like you're 13 years old, you're 15 years old, right? Okay, now the other extreme is role confusion, extreme role confusion. You're overly confused. So this can lead to a lack of direction and purpose, right? Where you don't know who you are, you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are. The individual may struggle with making decisions and committing to future goals, right? And the balance here is achieving a balance will foster a strong sense of self and direction while remaining open to new ideas and experiences, right? And that's the balance that we do as adults, right? It's like you know who you are, but not so much that you're unable to be receptive to the new experiences and the new things that are out there, right? And it's kind of like being at a store and checking out, or being like at a garage sale, right? Or at a what's it called, a bazaar in Mexico. Like you're looking at the things, right? You don't know what these things are, and you're kind of, that's how you should be as a human, right? It's like I have my things, right? I have my movies at my house, or I have my books, but here I am at a thrift store checking out these books because maybe some may be goods, and I may buy them, or these movies may be good and I may buy one or two. And that's kind of how you are in life, right? You can't go around saying this is who I am and that's it, everybody else shut up. You have to be like, I know what I have my books at home, my movies at home, but I may buy your idea or her idea or whatever, right? And so yeah, that's the balance resolution. And the individual can form a coherent identity and make meaningful life choices. So yes, I talk about this in my identity redevelopment video, where you're basically taking fragments of other identities that you like and you're integrating them into yourself to make you who you are, right? To create your identity. Okay, the sixth one is intimacy versus isolation, young adulthood. This is ages 18 to 40. This is like all of your favorite sitcoms: How I Met Your Mother, Big Bang Theory, Friends. This is like the big stage for like a lot of people, right? Where they're trying to find the person they're going to spend the rest of their life with, right? They're trying to get married. They're trying to start a family. They're trying to start up their career, right? So on one extreme, you have extreme intimacy, overly intimate. This can lead to enmeshments and loss of personal identity, right? Because you get so mixed up in the identities that you're already carrying from your childhood and your teenage years, as well as the new identities you're being exposed to, and you never really learn who you are as an individual, alone in society, right? But also with people that care about you. And the individual might become overly dependent on relationships for self-worth, right? So they may be like overly trusting, codependent, or very dependent. The other extreme is extreme isolation. Overly isolated can result in loneliness, depression, and difficulty forming close relationships. and the individual may struggle with vulnerability and emotional connection. This reminds me a lot to that trust one, right? Where here you're basically not trusting anybody, so you rather isolate and stay by yourself, right? Be by yourself. But I think you need both, and you need to experience both, right? And then find that balance, right? Where you have people, but you're also isolated. I may even make a video in the future about the importance of isolation, right? How important isolation is to meditate, to self-reflect, to find out who you are as a person, right? Okay, and the balance resolution here is achieving a balance encourages the formation of deep, meaningful relationships while maintaining a strong sense of self. Yeah, so you're able to build bridges with other people while also staying true to yourself and to who you are, right? And obviously having that you develop and grow. And the individual can engage in intimate relationships while maintaining personal boundaries and independence. Yeah, so you're able to engage in all these intimate relationships, friends, family, boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, while also maintaining your limits, right? Which I think that's ideal, right? Having that balance. Excuse me. Okay, the seventh one, we're getting into like the real adult stage. This is middle adulthood, ages 40 to 65 years old. On one extreme, you have extreme generativity, where you're overly focused on others. I'm thinking right away like mothers that will say like, my kids are my life, right? So you're like, and this can lead to neglect of personal needs and burnout, right? So you're overly dependent on other people, and you're with those people like all the time, and you will sacrifice yourself, right? In my analyzing good video, I talk about that, how that's one of the factors. It's either good for me or good for you, and these type of people would be the ones that I don't care about me, so it's probably not good for me, but it's good for you, right? And I'll take care of you, right? And the individual might struggle with self-care and personal fulfillment, right? Now the other extreme is overly focused or overly self-focused, and this in some weird way creates stagnation, and this can result in self-absorption and a lack of contribution to society, right? Which I may have a problem here. I'm not sure how this I mean, if you talk about self-absorption in terms of like only doing things that you want to do passively, yes, you may not contribute anything to society. But if you tell me like, okay, there's this writer or you're an author, and you lock yourself in your house or in your bedroom for months on end to write a good book, and then you contribute that to society, I don't see nothing wrong with that, right? The individual may experience a sense of purposelessness and disconnection. So yeah, if you're not connecting with anybody, of course, you may feel like you're doing everything for no reason, right? And the balance resolution, achieving a balance fosters a sense of productivity and contribution to society while ensuring personal growth and well-being. See, here that's the same thing. Productivity, contribution, and growth, personal growth is basically taking care of yourself, right? And your contribution is obviously like helping other people, right? So there it is. I'm not really sure what I just said there, but okay. The individual can engage in activities that benefit others and pursue personal goals and interests. Okay, so it's like I'm helping people, but I'm also doing things I want to do. Okay, and the last one, which is like the one I associate with death, is integrity versus despair. This is late adulthood, right? Like old people, third age citizens, or I forget what they call that, third age citizens, I think 65 plus years, right? You have extreme integrity on one point, so overly reflective on positive aspects. This can result in denial of past mistakes and an unrealistic self-perception. So this is like, my life was amazing, right? It's the best life anybody has ever had. And it's like, if you lived already, if you have lived 65 years, I doubt your life was perfect, but okay. And the individual might struggle with genuine self-acceptance, right? So accepting your shadow, that Carl Jung balance, the yin and yang, right? The other extreme is the extreme despair, overly reflective on negative aspects. So I guess this deals ultimately with reflection, right? You either reflect positively or negatively. And in this case, it leads to regret, bitterness, and fear of death, right? I guess if you regret, and I guess this is like a very advanced topic. I don't think I'm yet able to handle it. But if you're able to, if you regret a lot, you that will ultimately lead you to a fear of death, right? And I know there's like a religious correlation there somewhere. And the individual may struggle with accepting their life and finding peace. Yeah, because an old person is most likely thinking about death. So the balance resolution is achieving a balance fosters a sense of acceptance and contentment with life. I'm guessing here the acceptance part is accepting the negative, right? Because then it says contentment, and if you accept the positive, it's obviously going to make you happy or content. And the individual can reflect on their life with honesty, recognizing both successes and failures, and finding meaning and fulfillment, right? Okay, so I just want to share one more thing before I go. And this is from Erikson's biography because I feel like I haven't mentioned this. The virtues, there are virtues, there is a lot of information that has to do with all of this. But basically, there's like a positive thing that you get. Like, for example, from the first stage, you get hope. And that's the virtue, I guess. And you're also, like I said, socially, you're with your mom only. And if not, you have retractment, right? That's your pathology, or that's your vice. In the second one, stage number 2, you get will. You develop will after you face off autonomy versus shame and doubt. And if you don't, your vice will be, if you don't overcome that conflict, your vice will be compulsion, right? Which in this case, you're dealing with your mom and your dad. And the right of union is judicious. So you develop like a very harsh criticism, I guess. And this is the one that deals with law and order. Okay, in the third stage, the virtue that you get from here is purpose, right? So when you face off initiative and guilt, you develop purpose. If not, your vice will be, or your pathology will be, inhibition, right? This is a right of union, a dramatic right of union, and you could say here you develop moralism. In the previous one, that had to do with being judicious or critical, you develop law and order. And the first one had to do with cosmic order and deity, right? Basically, because you're still connected to God when you're born, right? Okay, in the fourth one, basically the virtue that arises from here is competence, and the vice or the pathology you could develop by not overcoming successfully or overcoming this stage successfully is inertia. This has to do, or inertia means like you're stagnant, right? Like you don't move. I just want to check if stagnant or stagnation basically means what I think it means, because I think it means the state of not flowing, not moving. Yes, just inertia, right? Technological order, here you're talking, oh yeah, in the third one, you're now talking about basic family, and here you're talking about your neighbors and your school, right? This is a technical stage, and it's formalism. The ritual is formalism. In the next one, where you face off when you're a teenager, identity versus confusion of identity, or role confusion. You're obviously with your own groups and foreign groups also, models of leadership. The virtue that you develop from here is faithfulness or fidelity, right? So you're loyalty. And if not, you're going to become kind of like hateful. That's the vice here. Here you have obviously an ideological vision of the world. You're a teenager, right? So the right of union is ideological, and the ritual is totalitarian. Okay, authoritarian, totalitarian. There's a difference in that, right? Let me know what it is in the comments. And in the next one, where you face off intimacy versus isolation, This has to do with like friends, but also like, you know, sexual partners, romantic partners. And the virtue you get out of this is love, but the pathology or the vice could be exclusivity, or being, you know, excluded basically. Here you develop schemas of cooperation and competence. The right of union is affiliation, and the ritual is being elitist, right? So I guess you do, and you are kind of elitist, right? When you have your own group of people, right? Like your wife, your husband, you become elitist. Like, this is my group. Um, Okay, the seventh one has to do with interest. You develop the virtue you develop is interest, so being interested in things. And the pathology or the vice you could generate is rejection, right? This is basically developing, procreating things for the next generation. So education and tradition is generative, and it's authoritarian, right? So the teenage years were totalitarian, and these are authoritarian, right? And there's a difference between that. And the last one, the virtue you get from it is wisdom. And if you don't, your vice or your pathology is going to be like hate, basically. You get wisdom. This one has to do with philosophical right of union, and it's dogmatic. And this is like your social group is like it's like humanity, right? My species. Oh yeah, the one before this one was basically division of labor in the household, like with you and your wife. I guess you could say like with your new family or the second family. And I think that's everything. The ritualism, like I said, and you can fit into this Freud and Piaget's theories, right? And just make like a big chart. I was thinking of doing that chart, but I think that's I may do it in the future. But I'm gonna look up difference between authoritarian, and what was the other one? Totalitarian, right? Totalit. And I think these may have to do with other things. Totalitarian suppresses traditional. hmm What's the difference between authoritarianism? Well, I think I'll investigate it and I'll put it in the comments, right? But yeah, basically that's all for this video. Let me know what you think. Erik Erikson's in the house, and I'll see you in the next one, all right? Peace.